story. I actually saw this for the first time. This was where I saw it. It was Megan Basham. This is a tweet. She said, what you need to understand is that the left-wing infiltration into our churches has, for decades, been organized and well-funded by secular foundations intent on hollowing out their spiritual doctrines and replacing them with political programs. And this is the fruit. So we're about to see the fruit. But Megan Basham, of course, is the author of Shepherds for Sale, where she catalogs organizations like the Arcus Foundation, funding ecclesiastical caucus groups like Reconciling Ministries Network in the United Methodist Church to advocate for worldly political positions under the garb and guise of religiosity, even though it's counterfeit. So that was a good sentence. I feel good about that sentence. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'm going to play this 30 seconds at a time and then add some commentary. But this is, you see, this is a worship service where J.D. Vance, a Roman Catholic, is there, Donald Trump, and then the whole Trump crew.
In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meatpacking plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation.
So, and I'll come back to that here in a second, but you'll hear this rhetoric that sounds very, I mean, you find this on mainstream media network. We're talking about trans people, gay people. They are afraid for their lives. And then I don't know why the left continues to do this. You know, look at these day laborers. If we send them away, what will we do? We'll have to actually work, you know. What has been the case for a long time is that in our country we have illegal immigration being used to pretty much fund a slave class that does all the work that supposedly no Americans want to do. We know that big corporations don't want to pay people enough to do. But here, this priest actually, let's look at who this is. This is Mariann Budde. I don't know how she pronounces her last name. She is an Episcopal prelate who served as the Bishop of Washington since November 2011. Before being elected Washington's first female diocesan bishop, she served 18 years as the rector of St. John's Episcopal Church in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She was born in 1959. She is not gay. I thought she was gay. She's not. She's married to a dude named Paul Budde. They have 2 children. One of the pertinent things here is in June 2020, amid the George Floyd protests, Budde criticized the use of tear gas by police and National Guard troops. But the thing was, they didn't use tear gas, and it wasn't done, she said, to allow President Donald Trump to pose for a photo op. It wasn't done for that reason. It was another media hoax that was later exposed after nobody was interested in this anymore. But what do you think the odds are that Donald Trump did not know who she was and that she publicly criticized him before this service? What was this service? This is an article written about it in the Associated Press. It's the inaugural prayer service. And so there's a picture, there she is. We won't read the whole article, but at the inaugural prayer service, the Right Reverend Mariann Budde, the Episcopal Bishop of Washington, made a direct appeal to the president to have mercy on the LGBTQ plus community and undocumented migrant workers, referencing Trump's belief that he was saved by God from assassination. She said, "You have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. The Trump administration has already issued executive orders rolling back transgender rights." They have the same rights as everybody else. And toughening immigration policies. That's true. When he returned to the White House, Trump was asked about the sermon. He said, "Not too exciting, was it?" And the president said, as he walked off with the staff toward the Oval Office, "I didn't think it was a good service. They could do much better." I just, he can't help himself. He talks about everything in the form of entertainment. It did not make for good entertainment. The reason I'm talking about it is not because it's not good entertainment. It's because of the theological foundations of what this woman did and why she felt that that was appropriate. Let's watch a little bit more of her address to the president, and then, watch, if you see Vance's face, he's not at all surprised. I mean, so remember, Vance is Roman Catholic. They don't acknowledge female clergy, first off. So he's sitting very respectfully for a woman that he actually doesn't think is a legitimate leader in the church. He's being respectful. And for that respect, I hope I've already established Donald Trump almost certainly knew that she wasn't a fan. He chose to be there anyway. J.D. Vance almost certainly knew that she was a heretic. He chose to sit here anyway. And what does she do but play exactly into whatever stereotypes they already have? They're not scandalized. They're also not amused, though. So let's watch a little bit more.
But the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here.
So when she's saying have
God teaches
mercy, sorry, I thought I'd pause that. When she's saying have mercy, what she's really saying is reverse your policy positions. The people elected you to do these things, and because I have the bully pulpit right now and I'm shaming you, I want you to not do those things. I actually don't think she thinks he's going to change his position. I think that what she's doing is an exercise in this cage match that we've been in for a long time, where she's in a position of power, so she's going to use it to bully the president and dare him to get up and make a scene. He's not at all inclined. When you look at him, he's just like, yeah, okay, whatever. This is the world I'm living in, and he just deals with it. This was what he put out later on Truth Social. He said, the so-called bishop, the so-called bishop who spoke at the National Prayer Service on Tuesday morning was a radical left hardline Trump hater. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. She was nasty in tone and not compelling or smart. All right, so this is true to form. This is who he is. This is how he attacks people who attack him. He returns in kind. When asked years ago what his favorite Bible verse was, it's eye for eye, tooth for tooth, which, of course, in its context is about not answering evil any more than evil has given you, limiting retribution. But he's governed by a different principle. He's all about retribution. He says, she failed to mention the large number of illegal migrants that came into our country and killed people. So yeah, that's in direct rebuke of what she was doing, saying, hey, and it's not like he hasn't heard this stuff before, but she says not all of them are criminals. A lot of them are not. He knows that, and he's actually, as he talked about this, been very clear. Not every single one of them is criminals. He's just concerned about the criminals. Those are the ones that he really wants to take care of. And what's been so disingenuous all the way along is, as he wants to talk about criminals, you're going, how dare you lump them all together? That's not the point. The point is that we're letting in people who are not citizens, who illegally have a track record where they're coming from, and we're just letting them in and not tracking them. It's just bad policy. So what's to be said about, well, let me finish the statement. Many were deposited from jails and mental institutions. It is a giant crime wave that's taking place in the UMC. Apart from her inappropriate statements, the service was very boring and an uninspiring one. She is not very good at her job. She and her church owe the public an apology. So I saw the thing saying he demands an apology. He's not saying I've been personally affronted, she should apologize to me. He's saying, look, this was not good. This is not good for our nation. This is tacky. It was in bad taste. On top of it, how do you, not only do you argue with the president, but you're super boring at it and just kind of classless. Yeah, I knew we needed to look at the scriptures. What did the scriptures say about the authority of the state? Is she within her, here's what I wanted to talk about. Is she, as a representative of a religious institution, entitled to or obligated to call the president to behave in the moral way that or that the faith subscribes. Now, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. I think liberals are part of a counterfeit alternative faith. I don't think they're a right extension of the Christian faith. I think they have different theological loyalties and presuppositions. I don't think they confess the fall. I don't think they confess a biblically recognizable doctrine of repentance or sanctification, holiness. It's a different faith altogether. But even so, if she's a different faith, is she within her rights to say what she wants? I mean, obviously, we all believe in free speech, so she can't be faulted for exercising her free speech. But how appropriate or inappropriate is it for a religious leader to subject a political leader to their moralistic worldview? If Joe Biden, for instance, came to my church, would I be within my rights to preach at him about abortion and the role of men in the household, and whatever other religious stuff and I think it is my right to do so, and I would want to do exactly that. So I'm not going to begrudge this woman her right to do that. I still think it was tacky and in bad taste because it's associated with the inauguration. It's one thing if he came out just wanting to see what she had to say or wanting to worship with the community, but he's kind of pressured to be there, and then she just. But you know what? I probably would have done the same thing. If Biden was and I somehow got to preach the inaugural worship service, I would probably lay right into him, and I would say it's okay because I'm a legitimate exemplar or a preacher in the faith, and she's not. But even so, like, the state can't even wade into these things. Whenever he says the so-called bishop, that's kind of inappropriate. It's not really appropriate for a member of the state to say what religious traditions are legitimate and not, or who's not. So it's a complicated thing, but we should lean on the scriptures, right? Let's see, here we go. This is Romans chapter 13, verses 1 through 7. This is what we're told about the right role of us, our relation to the state. Everyone must submit himself to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which is from God. The authorities that exist have been appointed by God. Consequently, whoever resists authority is opposing what God has set in place, and those who do so will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the one in authority? Then do what is right, and you will have his approval. For he is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not carry the sword in vain. He is God's servant, an agent of retribution to the wrongdoer. Therefore, it is necessary to submit to authority not only to avoid punishment, but also as a matter of conscience. This is why you pay taxes, for the authorities are God's servants who devote themselves to their work. Pay everyone what you owe him, taxes to whom taxes are due, revenue to whom revenue is due, respect to whom respect is due, honor to whom honor is due. So obviously nobody likes hearing this. Conservatives don't like hearing this whenever liberals are in charge of the government. But this is how we are to navigate our way through the world. Submit to worldly authority because God has ordained that they be in charge. And understanding this and submitting to this, that way lies peace. The problem is that this lady, she is already, if not directly participated in pushing back against government, lauded those who do so, and made public statements about the propriety of the government and Donald Trump in doing this. And I think it's really unfortunate that whoever was put in charge of this thought that was an appropriate note to start Trump's second presidency on. That's not an appropriate note to start on. It's not helpful. If we're all agreed that we need to stand together and be unified, that doesn't mean that everybody has to outsource their critical thought to Donald Trump, but I think it does mean that you have to give his platform a chance. He was elected by the American people on a certain platform, and to now just obfuscate as much as possible and to give him a headache wherever he goes, that's just not helpful. So, if it turns out that his policies around immigration are not good, we're going to see that. And people are going to get hurt along the way, for sure. But there is no version of government where people don't get hurt. Humans get hurt no matter what. And what is it that should motivate a leader of any country? Is it God's mercy and compassion? I don't think so. I think what we're seeing in this scripture, and I'll hold up another scripture in a minute, is that, the phrase is, he does not hold the sword in vain. There are worldly powers that have been tasked by God to exercise good governance and order and protect the innocent. And that is the language that he is using, bombastic as he is. He's seeing that there are criminals from other nations that are being allowed to come in and they are harming American citizens, and he's going to do something about it. And what's effectively out of an obstructionist rhetoric happening now is leftist religious leaders are saying, have compassion on those caught in the crossfire. But the reality, I mean, this just shows how out of touch with the reality a lot of people are, is evildoers have always caused a lot of suffering with people around them. And there is no way to stop the suffering except to stop evildoers. They're going to attach themselves to people. And so are you going to let the state do what it's here to do? One of the things that I wanted to make sure to say was this is a form of Christian nationalism. Of course, the iron law of woke projections says that they see it on the right, but they can't see it in themselves. But when you want the government to reflect your religious convictions, and you expect that, and you hector religious leaders who don't toe that line, that's Christian nationalism. And the thing is, I think the church scripturally is called to care for the foreigner, to care for the poor, to look out for the widow and the orphan and those who get stepped on by the world. But when Christians are then hectoring the government to do that for us, that's when everything gets so messed up. That's why, in my opinion, everything is so messed up right now. And this, up until 100 years ago, all governments knew, all people knew that the role of the government is not charity. Charity does that. The church does that stuff. And for hundreds of years, thousands of years, the church cared for the poor better than the government ever has. But what happened was the government displaced the church. And we're seeing the bitter fruits that come out of that. And so Budde, I don't know how you pronounce her last name, is an extension of that dysfunctional understanding of the role of the state. I don't believe it's the state's job to do charity work and to care for the vulnerable. I think that's the church's job. The state's job is to ensure good civil order. The church's job is to bring order, to bring mercy and compassion. But whenever we expect the church, the state to have mercy and compassion, and then the state, I keep screwing this up, and then the church to advocate for that and compel the government to do that stuff, that's not a workable situation. So one more scripture here. Let's look at, let's see, 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 13. Submit yourselves for the Lord's sake to every human institution, whether to the king as the supreme authority, or to governors as those sent by him to punish those who do wrong and to praise those who do right. For it is God's will that by doing good you should silence the ignorance of foolish men. Live in freedom, but do not use your freedom as a cover-up for evil. Live as servants of God. Treat everyone with high regard. Love the brotherhood of believers. Fear God. Honor the king. And of course, we don't have a king in America, but we do have a state and a state head. And it's hard to honor someone that you see as not honorable, but that's exactly what's required of children, told to honor and respect their parents, and how many people's parents are actually honorable and respectable. That's what slaves are told and regarding their masters. That's what women are told regarding their husbands. This is a very clear stream throughout the scriptures. And I know we Americans love bucking authority and doing what's right in our own eyes, but that produces really bitter fruit. So, Megan Basham, I'll come back to her in her tweet. She wrote Shepherds for Sale. She said, all this that you're seeing now with this Budde lady, this is an extension of a campaign that's gone on for decades, where worldly powers have infiltrated the church and taught them to blur that line between what is appropriately done by the state and what's appropriately done by the church. And then I really got a lot out of, here's her book if you want to buy it. I've bought it. Have I read it? No. But I saw a comment down here. It's happened in synagogues as well. I saw somebody saying, thank God we don't see that in non-denominational or evangelical churches. Oh, I'm not seeing it now. And she said, no, it's happening there too. And that's what her book catalogs. We need to understand there are forces that want everything centralized because then they can take control of that centralized force and have control over everybody else. The American way of governance is actually states oriented, and you spread people out and spread authority out so that humans are harder to control. And as much as I'm in favor of denominationalism and a shared covenant body, I have to acknowledge also that it works in favor if you can get, I mean, what did we see in the United Methodist Church? You centralize these thousands of churches under one covenant body that is given trust over their facilities. Then you distract them with a bunch of culture war stuff and you take over. And that's exactly what happened. And they were able to alienate millions of people from the denomination. And that'll be the next topic. But summing up this particular topic, I'm, of course, annoyed with Budde and people like her. And I'm annoyed that even at the start of a Trump administration, that people like that find themselves with the bully pulpit that they're using. But also, I think it's worth noting, Vance and Trump, they could have gotten up and left. They could have made a big stink. They sat there. They were respectful of the service. They were respectful of the person preaching at them. And, you know, I know that the caricature of Trump in particular is that he's a child who can't tolerate anything. I think that this is a counterfactual. So I hope that that's something seen and appreciated by people who don't like him. I doubt it will be. Trump derangement syndrome is a real thing. And there are people, I'm particularly concerned. There's one guy in particular, but there are a lot of them that are religious leaders that you look at their Facebook posting or their Twitter posting, and there's maybe a thing or two about Jesus, and there's a ton of stuff against Trump. And I just think that that's really embarrassing because that shows where their real God is, right? So you want to know what a pastor worships, scroll down their timeline and see what they're putting out into the world. That's I needed to say something offensive. I did now. So I'll go on to the next topic in a minute. Oh my gosh, so many comments, guys. I'm not going to be able to go over these, but I want to... Oh, greet Malher. I did an interview with her a long time ago. Lovely woman. Glad to have you, sister. I didn't do it. Yeah, man, so many good comments. Thanks, everybody, for joining. Man, I tapped into something you'll care about. Dale says, most far-left liberals I've talked with conflate legal and illegal immigration into one issue in order to maintain the narrative that those on the right hate migrants. Yeah, it's a really confused and frustrating situation. Hey, Quattro. Not only would you be within your rights, you'd be meeting your obligation as a Methodist elder to preach at Biden. You know, and I was in favor. I covered last week that Spanish priest who denied the gay mayor communion because he was in an unrepentant gay relationship. I think that's totally his prerogative. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, not our truth, but God's truth. And that's the thing. She was speaking her God's truth. She just follows a different God. She says it's the same God. It's not. Calling Episcopalians part of a church is a stretch. Would these church services really preach Jesus and forget the political stuff? Only Jesus' kingdom is eternal, and the worldwide platform would allow the world to hear. Yeah, I think the reality is that, I mean... Yeah, the other thing I meant to say and didn't is there is no such thing as a law that doesn't have moral implications. Every law is a reflection of moral priorities and presuppositions. And in that sense, Christian nationalism really is unavoidable. You know, when you have a Christian majority in a nation, then you're going to have laws reflect that. You know, there's a reason why nations in Christendom have laws against marrying girls of a certain age, and Muslim ones don't. You know, there are different religious and moral convictions that come with every tradition. We're not all the same. And part of the reality that we need to understand is that liberal Christianity is not Christianity. It is a different religion with different religious convictions and priorities. And that's when she's preaching here, she's not preaching. I mean, this is not meant to argue with what I said before. There is the church and there is the state, and these two powers are not the same. But what is religious is political. What we believe has political implications. And so she is preaching her doctrine, her religion, and it's synonymous with the far left wing of the Democratic Party. That is mainline denominational liberal Christianity that facilitated a hostile takeover of these organizations that once were biblically recognizable. They did a bait and switch using a lot of the same terminology but preaching a different religion. So she is preaching her religion, and it's ugly. It's ugly, and it's not. I mean, that's, if I'm generously interpreting what Donald Trump was saying, he's not critiquing it for being unentertaining. He's critiquing it for being ugly and banal and uncompelling, and a waste of everybody's time. And that's what liberal Christianity is, if I could be frank. I've said frank things like that before, and I'm going to continue to say them. The only reason that they gain ascendancy is because they're militant, and their strategy is to be false in posturing themselves in a certain way and take positions of power. And that's what we're seeing right now. But it's in decay. The question is how much it's going to be able to drag down with it along the way.